This story is submitted by Matthew Calamine. He is the writer and director of the featured film titled The Grin. It is a story based on true events that actually happened on a set where it was filmed, or otherwise known as his house from childhood. Here is his story. I found myself at home one weekend night. My parents were out of town, and I was returning from a canceled sleepover at a friend's house. The lights were on, and I got in the door, and I remember getting a phone call from that same friend shortly thereafter, which would end up being the last normal event of the night. My brother was playing video games in the next room, and I could hear him tapping furiously at a video game while he spoke on the cordless phone. I walked around in the living room and ended the phone call in the kitchen, when I remember hearing some high-pitched squeal that came from the house somewhere, and I couldn't place where it was coming from. As it sounded the same in every room, I went to investigate. It ended after about a minute and was interrupted by the phone ringing. But the phone was not in the kitchen where I had left it. It was in the bathroom, on the counter, in front of the sink. I answered the phone, and there was nobody there, so I hung up. At this point, then I heard a dragging sound, like a large, heavy object was being dragged in the attic crawlspace above me. I followed the sound as it slowly navigated from room to room and ended up in my parents' bedroom, who still had a waterbed. After the sound made it to the far wall, it stopped, and the phone rang again. This time, my friend was on the other end of it. I told him what was going on, and he told me to be careful and call the police. After I got off the phone, I laid down on the waterbed and was horrified to find a body-shaped solid object inside the waterbed mattress, and I leaped up. I then heard a knock at the door and answered it quickly, but there was nobody there. It was at this point where my brother called me from his room to check something out that he had just discovered in the game he was playing, and a little more than annoyed at his lack of interest in what was going on, I stormed into his bedroom. There was nobody there. His bed was made, the room was spotless, neither the console nor the TV was on, and the controller was wrapped and unplugged. There was no way he could have hid and cleaned his room in the few seconds it took for me to make it from the door to his room. I had been alone the entire night, hearing for 20 minutes straight my brother playing a game that he was not present to be playing. The phone rang again, but again, it was not where I left it. This time, it was resting on the kitchen counter where I had originally left it, so I walked through the entire house to answer it. It was my friend calling again, this time saying that the call was dropped for some reason, and he was calling me back. I explained what just happened, and there was another knock at the door. Since I was standing right next to it, I peeked out the window within 2 seconds of the knocks, and there was nobody there. At this point, I opened the door and stepped onto the porch to make sure I didn't see anyone running away, as I had a wide open yard and there wasn't anything to hide behind. I walked into the yard to look around, but didn't find anything. I found myself engaged in several more minutes of talking to my friend before I got off the line, and it was at that moment I realized the place I'd been staring off to in space while talking. There were 2 very large, black, reflective eyes looking back at me. The figure was tall and lanky and stood only 10 feet or so from the shadow cast by the front garage. The most notable feature he wore was an inhumanly large smile. He was grinning with oily metallic teeth from literally ear to ear. Despite me staring directly at him for more than 5 minutes, I pretended I did not notice him, and through willpower alone, made it inside of the house without running as fast as I could, and instead walked calmly. I remember feeling like if I ran, he would chase me, and somehow knew that he would have caught me easily. I barricaded myself in my room the rest of the night and did not fall asleep until the sun came up the next morning and my parents were home. Nothing like that ever happened to me before, and nothing like that has happened to me since.